Hello and welcome back to Objective Personality Culture Commentary number 5. We've been taking time to go through my Consume Digest Daily Notes. That's a different segment, but specifically here we're talking about some of my notes that I used when I was first starting to visualize objective personality and their types. Because I think that for me it helped to visualize a type. It's one thing to say, okay, well, you have a type and then you have a person. This is an example of a person with a psychological type. Specifically in this video, we're going to be using an INTP male, double masculine, TISI, sleep, blast, play, consume, Andreas Borgard. And this is where you get from a specific psychological function to a psychological type. Now that we're including social types, this common notation has been invalidated to the extent that it's now just a bundle of functions instead of describing a psychological type, because once that inclusion mechanism of the social types was included, now it downregulated. I mean, that's a schism argument in terms of theory, right? Because some people, they might not recognize the social types, so they might say no, it's only 512. We're not scaling up to 2048, which would be 512 times 2. We're gonna make sure we do the math on that right. 512 times 4. Yep, 2048. Okay, so today we're going to be going back into really just to stop and just to take a look and to say, hey, what do we see? And really trying to harp on this, right? Because people find themselves at their learning curve in terms of, to the extent that you might find it valuable to learn objective personality. There's so many different ways to learn it, whether that be from the perspective of theory and trying to make an attempt to backwards rationalize how we got from Jung's theoretical baseline to objective personality, and to figure out where people layer things on top of versus they're superseding the theory. And then structure, starting at, well, how do you visualize a psychological function? How do you visualize a psychological type? What do these bubbles and circles and letters, what do they even mean, quite literally? And what are we supposed to take away from this, as we're like, yeah, so that's a function, is it a bear? Like, this is an orthodox Jungian psychological function and an orthodox Jungian psychological types. We don't have modalities, and we don't have animal functions as a higher order combinatoric. I just realized I've been using the cursor to show stuff on the screen when you can't see it. Pause. Okay, so that's been fixed. So I kind of wanted to just keep on chopping it up with this, like, okay, a masculine FI, masculine SE, feminine NI, feminine TE, and to chop it up with that. But I wanted to start with an example. Let's start with an example of using the person that I cited earlier, or the specific psychological functions that I cited earlier with regards to this as a bundle of functions or as a psychological type. So we're going to take a look at this. Double masculine, TI-SI, sleep, blast, play, consume. So there are multiple ways to visualize this. We could actually write it out something like this, or we could type it out like this, or we could type it out like this. This is the animal function temperament stack, if you will. You have DI 1 to 3 ST sleep, OI 3 to 4 SF blast, OE 2 to 4 NF play, DI 1 to 2 NT consume. So what does this mean? This means that based on the grant function stack as we can see it, feminine TI, masculine NE, masculine NI, feminine TI, feminine NE, masculine SI, and masculine FE. You have ST sleep, DI, wait. You have DI, ST sleep, ST sleep, ST sleep, ST sleep, and then you have OE, which is your extroverted observer or your extroverted perception function, your extroverted irrational function. Wrong. Whoa, I just got that totally wrong. Okay, so let's back it up, right? Because this can get confusing really easy. So we're saying, we're thinking about how, well, I'm trying to describe how I first started out learning about the objective personality system. And one way that I found to do that was to just write down specific psychological functions, write down specific psychological types, and include them in order to help me visualize a psychological function with the types that they're using. Does that make sense? So an example of me doing this is taking an example from pop culture, or specifically from Personality Trainer, formerly known as ENFP Male, and to find one of the case studies on the channel where they're doing an interview with a person that has been objectively typed as a specific function. And again, in these, as quote-unquote the early days, some of these might have been updated with changed functions and changed types, since the third pillar, application/practice, is still being honed in terms of, well, what language are we using to identify a specific function, and what language are we using to identify a specific type. Okay, so to that end, we're talking about double masculine TISI, sleep, blast, play, consume. So what does that mean to a regular person on the street, or a person trying to learn about this? Okay, you would start with breaking down common notation versus formal notation. At the top in blue is what we have come to know as formal notation. You have your modalities, you have your first animal function, and you have your animal function stack. On your right hand side in orange, or in like a yellowish orange, you have the grant function stack with the modalities. So feminine TI, feminine NE, masculine SI, masculine SE. On your left, in the color grayish white, you have your animal function temperament stack with included ordinance and directionality. Directionality in brackets, in curly braces. That's the directionality in curly braces. And then you have ordinance in brackets. So for this type, we would be specifying to say, okay, they're using ST sleep. Well, what type of ST sleep are they using? They're using DI 1 to 3 ST sleep. So if you can visualize that on your screen, you'd be able to see DI 1 to 3 ST sleep. Okay. So DI 1 to 3 ST sleep, and then OI 3 to 4 SF Blast, and then OE 2 to 4 NF Play, and then DI 1 to 2 NT Consume. Okay, so again, 1 to 3 ST Sleep, 3 to 4 SF Blast, 2 to 4 NF Play, and 1 to 2 NT Consume. And you can debate that in terms of theory, structure, and application / practice when it comes to, okay, so why did you start with sleep and blast on the right side instead of the left side? Do you think the chirality, do you think the rotational momentum actually is implied based on how you're notating it in terms of common notation? And that's, you can get into very interesting theory when you say, okay, well, what types would prefer the rotational mechanism being left hand or right hand side? And then you also get into, okay, so what if this was, see, right now this is an introverted decider. What if you had an extroverted observer or an introverted observer? Would that sleep, see, for me, when I think about it, I think about blast and consume rotating to the right side. I think about blast and consume rotating to the right side. So that would be, for me, that would be consume and then play for DI. Consume and then play for DI. And then it would be sleep and then blast for the left side. But that's personal, because for me, based on my type, I rotated in that way for consume, sleep, blast, play. So in the next entry, we'll get into, the last time I checked, they typed Carl Jung and they typed Sigmund Freud as these specific types. So we'll go in and we'll write them down and check it out. Objective Personality Culture Commentary number 5. How do you write out psychological functions and psychological types? And how do you think about them? What does it mean to use ST sleep? What does it mean to use this flavor of ST sleep versus another flavor? And what type is most similar in terms of this animal function temperament stack? How do you compare and contrast these similarities and these differences? All that and more coming up next in Objective Personality Culture Commentary number 6.